Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Transfer Portal podcast presented by NoContextCFB. I'm your host for today, Minnesota Andrew. We're going to kind of keep Minnesota and Wisconsin Andrews because we are both on the podcast. And we also have Dylan Reubenking here. How are we all doing today after a great weekend of college football?
Yeah, doing great. It's a really exciting week of college football. Excited to see you making your hosting debut. Doing great so far. And yeah, can't wait for this pod.
So as for me, I'm not going to say that Wisconsin's back. I'm not going to say that. But to get the win and win the way that they did against Purdue was fantastic. I always love winning at West Lafayette. And my school, U of H, decided to lie to me over the weekend, but I'm going to go more in depth on that later. But no, it was actually overall a really good day for me. UH wins on homecoming. Wisconsin gets a win over a ranked team. Could not be happier right now.
Yeah, all of our teams found a way to win this last Saturday. Obviously, Minnesota was able to dominate Maryland. Oregon found a way to pull it out against UCLA, and you talked about Wisconsin and Houston. And we will go into your story about Houston a little bit later. But the first thing I want to talk about is a story that's developed today, and that is Texas Tech firing Matt Wells after starting pretty well this year. And we all knew they were projected to not do very well in the Big 12, according to standings records. I don't know why this firing happened. Obviously, it's going to be something that's happening behind closed doors. I want to get your guys's your thoughts about not why this happened, because no one knows anything, but how this is going to affect this Texas Tech team as they're going into their biggest game of the season against Oklahoma this next week.
So I'll go ahead. I'll start off with this. I personally don't get it why now. I mean, we talked about it right before we hit record, but you got Oklahoma this weekend in Norman. After Oklahoma looked, let's just be brutally honest, abysmal against Kansas. They won that game on an illegal play. After that, you got Iowa State at home in Lubbock. Then you had Oklahoma State in Lubbock. And then you closed out the season in Waco at Baylor. I just don't understand why you would make such a hard transition, such a hard change, such a drastic, firing at this moment when you're playing 4 ranked teams in a row, 2 of them at home. I don't know how this Texas Tech team is going to be mentally. Texas Tech, they were projected to be like 4-8, 5-7 before the season started. They got a huge win over UH at the beginning of the season. They strung a couple wins against SF Austin, Florida National, lost at Texas, but let's just be honest, I feel like anybody with a brain could have seen that coming. But then you go to Morgantown and you win it at West Virginia. So in terms of like Texas Tech, they're 5-3 right now. How can I look at Texas Tech and be like, oh yeah, Matt Wells should have totally been fired? No, you're about to play 4 ranked teams, 2 of them at home. I don't understand why Texas Tech felt they need to do this. I feel like they could have really gone 2-2 during the stretch. I don't even think they're going to win a game now. They're probably going to they're not even going to be bowl eligible, in my opinion, after this. I'm just don't know. I mean, did Matt Wells get a call to join the NFL like Cliff Kingsbury did? I mean, I highly doubt it, but I'm truthfully dumbfounded. I don't know what else to say. This makes zero sense to me.
Yeah, they had a really bad year last year, and I thought it was not really a hot seat situation because it's kind of early. But I did think he really needed to prove it year, and they've already won more games this year than they did last year. And I thought, you talked about the Houston win. They're the only team to beat Houston. Winning at Morgantown's not easy. They did blow that 14-point lead to Kansas State, but I didn't think that was a fireable offense or anything like that, blowing that lead to K-State. And you talked about everything is in front of them. And now they're probably going to be, underdogs in every game, and rightfully so. But there's a decent chance if Matt Wells would have stayed, they could have gone 2-2. I think that Iowa State game is, I would go with Texas Tech in that one. The Baylor one's kind of a toss-up for me. Oklahoma State, you never really know. The first thing that popped in my head when I heard the news was something to do with maybe vaccination, but I was like, well, this is Texas. I don't think that's the case at all, but I really don't know. This is really out of nowhere. They've overachieved in my opinion. So I don't get why this is happening now.
Yeah, it seemed like they beat everyone that's not who they should beat, because Houston, that was definitely an upset to an extent, but they beat a lot of teams that some people may say, oh, it's going to be at least a closer game, and Texas Tech ended up pulling it out. So I wouldn't say he was really playing with house money for these last few games, but I mean, he definitely has performed a lot better this year, and the firing makes no sense. Obviously, there's something going on that we don't know. And yeah, it's going to be tough seeing the Texas Tech team go play Oklahoma this next week. They're going to be, I don't know the current spread, but they're going to be a decent dog, probably like 15, 16 points. And yeah, I'm kind of confused about why this firing happened now rather than, if they were just not happy with him, maybe wait till after the season. There's something going on we don't know, which is the case 95% of the time. So talking about Oklahoma, let's go from next week's Oklahoma game to this week's Oklahoma game against Kansas. There are so many things I could talk about with this OU team that I'm going to talk about later, but let's focus on right now. Oklahoma is just overperforming, and overperforming to the extent that they're going to lose sooner rather than later. Sorry for that pun. I had that planned. If they were going to lose, I apologize. But Oklahoma wins the game on an illegal play. Caleb Williams takes the ball out of the ball carrier's hands and he runs for the first down. It's an illegal play. They rule it legal. No one knows why. I want to get your guys's, what do you guys think would have happened if Kansas would have pulled that off? Because if Kansas pulls that off, it's easily the biggest upside of the year, not even just points wise, but just Kansas, who is the second worst team in the Power Five, beating Oklahoma, who is projected to go to the playoff before the season started.
So we're not even talking about Oklahoma being a top 15 team, as far as I'm concerned, if Kansas pulls that off. We're dealing with a second storm field of the season for Kansas. But the thing with Oklahoma is, we kind of already said it, Oklahoma won that game on an illegal play. They should not have won that game. Kansas should have had that ball back. They should have been given the opportunity to go back and score and take the lead again. They were not. They were shafted. This is just an embarrassment. It's embarrassing. I in our personal rankings, I think I took Oklahoma back to like number 6 from like number 4. I believe I had them last week. To me, they lost. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, I don't know why I punished them by only 2 spots, but they should be punished like an actual loss. First of all, they were going into Kansas, into Lawrenceville with what, as a 40-point favorite, I think the line was. It was something else ridiculous. And the fact that you didn't even cover, well, garbage time touchdown, obviously, but the fact that you barely covered a quarter of it, I don't know what I'm supposed to like about Oklahoma right now. And the thing with Oklahoma right now is, after they beat TCU with Caleb Williams in his first game, it was essentially like, yes, this is the Oklahoma that we know. This is the Oklahoma that we love. Not me. I don't love Oklahoma. I've been to Oklahoma, terrible state. But besides that, we looked at Oklahoma and we thought that this was finally going to be the team that we're so used to seeing the playoff that's going to win the Big 12 championship. Right now, we're not. Right now, we're not even thinking about that anymore. We don't see them that way. And the fact that this is their first 8-0 start since Jason White was quarterback in 2004. How have we gone 17 years and this is their first 8-0 start? That seems ridiculous to talk about. And in terms of Oklahoma's next, string games, the next 4 games, it's essentially the same as Texas Tech's schedule. They got Texas Tech this weekend. Then they're gonna have Baylor. Then they're gonna have Iowa State. Then they're gonna have to go to Stillwater for Bedlam series against Oklahoma State. I pray that they lose at least 2 of those games, to be honest with you, man, because they're not a playoff team. You go head to head against Georgia, Caleb Williams is going to get destroyed. You go head to head against, let's say Alabama somehow gets in, or Ohio State. Well, Cincinnati, I mean, I think they probably have the best chance against Cincinnati, and I still think Cincinnati would actually beat them. We'll see how it goes for Oklahoma. But as for me, selling big time on Oklahoma, they're gonna get punished. It's coming. No pun intended. I'm sorry. Sooner rather than later. All right. This is your fault for bringing that word into my mind. But no, in all seriousness, I'm sold on Oklahoma. If they somehow BS their way into the top 4, it's just going to be the same story as it always is. And it's just going to be the same old, I told you so. I told you so. We know this. Nothing's going to change until we're given a reason to believe why it's going to change.
the fact that Kansas was outplaying Oklahoma for so long, and I know Kansas's defense kind of gave in. They were giving up touchdown drive after touchdown drive in that second half, specifically the fourth quarter. It's just incredible to me that a team that has far inferior talent and coaching than Oklahoma is just remarkable to me. And we're talking about that handoff from Kennedy Brooks to Caleb Williams. That was on a fourth down at midfield, and Brooks looked to be short. And there was like 3 minutes left. And Kansas, the way they were running the ball, I think they probably could have, gone down and taken the lead, because I think they were down 28-23 at that point. So I think if they would have, had the time and made the right plays, which you can't always rely on Kansas to make the right plays. But the way they were playing the game, I think they honestly could have gone down and scored. And, it's only a matter of time. Like if they were to bring it down to, 20 seconds and try to score a touchdown then, and, when you have Oklahoma, the way they were rolling, you couldn't give them enough time. But I think Kansas could have won that game if they got that stop. So I was really upset to see that play wasn't even really looked at. And, if Kansas would have beat Oklahoma, that would have fully unleashed the 2007 vibes that the season has given us already. But yeah, I agree with everything Andrew said. I mean, Oklahoma, I had them number 2 in the preseason. I thought they were going to be in the playoff, potentially win a playoff game for once. Now, like, I know they look different with Caleb Williams and the defense still blows, but I don't see it. And if they get in the playoff, I think they would probably get rocked by anybody not named Cincinnati. But I agree. I think Cincinnati would win.
Yeah, and I know we've talked a lot about the Oklahoma just being disappointing in that game. I want to talk about something that really irked me. Second quarter, I want to say, Oklahoma has the ball and they run an offensive play. Play ends up being a pick. Caleb Williams is looking downfield the entire time. He throws a deep ball, double covered, picked. No one in their right mind throws that ball at all. Double covered. I don't know why he throws that. The thing that really upset me is he has a dump off to his right in the flat. It's a 10-yard needed for the first down. He has 20 yards of grass right in front of him. The ball carrier would have, if he caught the ball, if he threw it, of course. And it's like, I understand you want to make the play. You're losing to Kansas. It's disappointing. It's already a disappointment of a game that you were ever losing to Kansas. But come on, you just got to get the easy first down. You got to move the ball. You got to get something going on offense, because nothing was going good for Oklahoma at the beginning of that game, especially just the entire first half. They got outplayed. It's not even something bad happened according to like refs, or Oklahoma just wasn't, looking like Oklahoma. No, Kansas outplayed them, which is just absolutely sickening to me. But I think talking all this bad about Oklahoma, we have to give a little bit of credit to Lance Leipold. Kansas has looked a little bit better this year. They don't look as bad as they have in years past. I think he's going to help them move that program in the right direction. I think it was a great hire. So we've spent the last few minutes talking about the
Wisconsin Whitewater legend Lance Leipold. Okay. The guy has won numerous Division III titles. He was able to build up a Buffalo program around when he finally got hired there. Wisconsin guy. All right. This is a Wisconsin born and bred guy. I am excited to see how he's going to turn around this Kansas program. One of the most underrated coaches right now in college football, even though his record does not reflect it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't change that program in a day, a week, a month, a year, probably multiple years, but he's getting them in the right direction. Spent the last few minutes talking about Caleb Williams. A lot of people were talking about, hey, you know what? If he turns this Oklahoma team around from when Rattler was playing, you know what? He might be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Last week, I don't know if you can really say that, but I do want to talk about who do we think is the best quarterback in college football. I'm going to start with Dylan on this one. Who do you think has been the best performing quarterback in college football so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a guy that's really, exploding off the page. There's not a guy that's, in every headline that's like, such and such for Heisman question mark. Like, you're not seeing his face all over. Like, at this point, we usually have kind of a poster boy for the Heisman race, and we just don't really have that. Now, with that being said, I do think that it's probably been a battle between Bryce Young, Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, your guy, Andrew W. I know, and Kenny Pickett's been phenomenal. I think consistently, I'd probably go with Bryce Young. Now, he has way more weapons than the other guys do, but I do think that he's been, everything that they've wished of him in his first year as a starter. Matt Corral, to be honest, like his completion percentage is really good. He's not turning the ball over. I just expected that offense to be a little bit more explosive, like 350, 375 passing yards a game, which it's not really there. And then with Kenny Pickett, I think he's been a veteran. He's been at Pitt for so long, and he's finally breaking out, having a huge year. I think he'll probably be in New York the way he's playing. Right now, I'd probably give a slight edge to Bryce Young for the best quarterback in college football as of right now.
So for
Andrew,
me, thanks for interrupting me. And I'm just kidding. So this one kind of hurts. This is a guy that I feel like I backed since week one, since it was confirmed that his job was that he won the job in preseason. And this kind of hurts because truthfully, I'm going to see this quarterback this weekend. And I hope he absolutely proves me wrong whenever I call him the best quarterback in college football. Of course, I'm talking about Tanner Mordecai of SMU. I think he's the most underrated, underappreciated quarterback in college football right now. Right now, he's tied for first in the FBS, along with Bailey Zappi for touchdowns. He's thrown 7 in such a pass-heavy attack offense, which in all honesty, when you look at the game logs by itself, you know, he's got 2 multi-interception games, but he's won both of them. He's found out how to come on top. And then one of them was against TCU where he threw 3 picks. But guess what? He still found the plays in order. It's also his mental preparedness that I think really intrigues me a lot about him. He's just such a good quarterback. He's a transfer from Oklahoma. He's been utilizing his weapons perfectly. Rashee Rice, Reggie Roberson, Grant Calcaterra. This is just such a great Danny Gray. Even I keep forgetting him whenever I talk about. He is really bringing these guys out so much. And I just think he's underappreciated. You know, when we talk about these Heisman, you know, who's leading, you know, the race so far, I don't know why he's not in top 3, top 2 conversation. I think to me, in all honesty, I think he's number 1. I really do. You know, he's got 29-7. He's 2,300 yards right now. He's got an SMU team that was only 7-5 last year. They already got 7 wins on the season. He's got one of the best offenses in all of college football right now. And he's really bringing in this new – there's a sense with SMU right now that they can go out and they can beat Cincinnati within a few weeks. Personally, I don't think it's going to matter if, you know, we see what happens with SMU this weekend. All right, but that's just a personal little budge right there. I just think Tanner Mordecai is just really underrated. He's really winning games for SMU right now. He's got the Hail Mary against Louisiana Tech, which the way that the ball placement that he had with Reggie Roberson was immaculate. He's come out with big plays. I just think there's not enough about this guy to love. There's just so much about him. To me, he's the Heisman. He's the best quarterback. He's displayed the best, and he would have my vote if we had the Heisman Trophy voting today.
Yeah, Tanner Mordecai needs more love. He's performed so well this year. I also really love his wide receiver core. So many guys that are just, oh my gosh, talented on that team. And I know Dylan talked about this. One of my guys, Kenny Pickett, going into the season, he's played freaking amazing. He's, in my opinion, he's in the top 2 for Heisman candidacy right now. I would personally take him over Matt Corral, just going off of he's exceeded expectations that much. And I don't really know how much Ole Miss's offense, like, we know they have a good offense, but they could be better. And I think that team probably ends up finishing with 3 or 4 losses. I don't know if they would be able to give a Heisman to a guy who is very talented, but has 3 or 4 losses when you got a guy like Bryce Young or Kenny Pickett, who will probably end up with 1 or 2 losses. But a guy I want to talk about is a guy that we kind of just wrote off after a disappointing week 1 and 2 and 3, but he's really stepped up these last few weeks. Even though they're against defenses that really aren't that good, he's shown a lot of growth, and that is CJ Stroud for Ohio State. I think CJ Stroud, he didn't play particularly well against Minnesota, against Oregon, really even against Tulsa. And he's really just taken that next step. He's starting to play as we expected him to coming into the season. He's got so many great players on that team. I'll talk about the Ohio State weapons a little bit later, but I think if we're talking about best quarterbacks in college football, I think going into these next few weeks where Ohio State has to play Penn State. They're going to have to play Michigan. They're going to have to play Michigan State. And then chances are either Iowa or Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship. And neither of those teams are going to be easy beats. I think CJ Stroud is going to prove himself as one of the best quarterbacks in college football. And I think he's already done that to some people. So, and also still love Kenny Pickett. I think he's amazing. Talking about the Big Ten with CJ Stroud, I want to talk about one of the most interesting, not good, definitely not good, one of the most interesting games of the weekend, and that's Illinois against Penn State in Happy Valley. You know, we had the whole Brett Bielema incidents throughout this week where he said his offensive line sucks. And they go out and they beat Penn State. 9 overtimes. This is really the first big game where we've seen multiple overtimes. I want to say we saw the 2-point conversions happen in Utah, San Diego State earlier in the year, but Illinois-Penn State was the first time we actually saw teams go multiple overtimes with the 2-point conversion. Me personally, I didn't get to watch the actual conversions because I was at a game. So I want to hear your guys' opinions. First off, what do you think of the rule? And second off, what do you think this does for Penn State, who are already at risk of possibly losing James Franklin with a lot of high value coaching positions opening?
This rule is freaking stupid. I mean, it really is. I mean, I don't even, because I cannot believe that I gave up watching the first half quarter, and maybe even most of the quarter of the Wisconsin Purdue game to give attention to these overtimes. Because I knew that if I was just going to watch this game only, or if I was only going to watch Wisconsin, I wasn't going to watch these overtimes. I was going to miss all the madness on social media. So I was like, all right, fine, I'll go watch it. Truthfully, I don't even know what the hell's going on here, man. We're just talking about short plays from the 2-yard lines. That's what we're doing at this point. It's madness, but it's like, I don't know if I'm supposed to like this, love it, or hate it. I think this is one of those rules that when they made it, I don't know if they fully, thought it through just in case if it would get this far. We saw and people are blaming Texas A&M and LSU for their 7 overtime game 2 years ago, I believe it was now. And that's the reason why we have these 2-point conversion contests. It's fun to watch, but truthfully, if I was a coaching staff member or even a player, and I know that there are players out there that said they love this, I would hate it because it's like you only got one play to make or break. It could make or break your whole season. And for Penn State, it essentially did. I mean, Illinois just had to run it once and boom, they were in. And I don't really know how to go about this right now. I mean, the quarterback display was terrible. I thought the play calling in the overtimes was questionable. I just didn't really care for it. That's really it. Don't get me wrong. This is great social media content. This is great no context content. But is that the reason why we're playing these games? Is for the entertainment factor? I mean, it honestly doesn't feel real. It feels like Disney wrote these rules, man. Like, I feel like we were watching Comedy Central on a gridiron with this game, to be honest with you, man. I just didn't really care for it, really. But you know what? I will say this. In terms of a football perspective, I hate it. But as far as like enjoyability, yeah, I gotta be honest, I kind of enjoyed it. Even though it was freaking stupid. Like an Adam Sandler movie. That's really what I gotta say on that.
I don't know how I can follow that up much better. I mean, I was trying to watch I didn't watch this game in the regulation because why? But like I was waiting for the Oregon UCLA game and ABC had Illinois-Penn State, and I think it had just gone into the first overtime. And I was like, okay, I'll pop it up on my laptop and I'll watch the Oregon game on my computer, on my TV. And then it's probably like midway through the second quarter and that thing's on the 8th overtime. I'm like, hang on a second, what's happening here? And how many 2-point conversions were there? Like 12, something like that. I mean,
it was a 10 drought. So five straight OTs where no one scored.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I kind of get the entertainment factor of it, but when it's like 2 offenses that have just been poo the entire night, I just don't really want to watch, 2 teams struggle to get into the end zone from 2 yards out for 20 minutes. I don't know. That's just me, but I do see where like if it's something like the LSU Texas A&M game where they're scoring and they're scoring and they're scoring, I get that's kind of more fun. But at the same time, yeah, from a football perspective, I just don't think it's very fun. Now, at the same time, I do think that the regular overtime rules, the first overtime rules, or miles better than what the NFL has. And I don't think you can really argue that. I hate the NFL overtime rules. That's a whole different conversation. I think that should probably be like it shouldn't be a jump from, taking the ball at the opponent's 25-yard line to immediately having like you just have to do point. Like I think there should be something in
It's
between.
too drastic.
Yeah, exactly. I think if they were to do it, maybe make it like, what is it? Is it the second overtime where they start the 2-point conversion battle, or is it the third?
Third.
I want to say it's the third where they start. So after 2 overtimes.
Okay, I think they should probably. It's kind of tough because not every game's going to go that far, but I feel like if they were to do that, I think it should be 5. I just don't think any game should come down to a 2-point conversion off. I really don't think it should. I think
I'll give it until I'll agree with you the 5th. I just hope that we don't go into an era where we turn into international soccer and we're just kicking field goals for fun. 3 out of 5, or vast majority after 5. You know what I mean? So I just hope we don't go into that. But for the betting people out there, Andrew, I know you're a little bit into the betting scene. Imagine going into that game before it even started, and someone told you, like, you bet the under on this game, and then someone told you, "Oh, this is going to go into 9 overtimes." Imagine how they would have felt. You're an under better, which I think the line was at like 42 or something like that. I'll have to double check it. And you essentially get told, "Yeah, it's going to go into 9 overtimes." You probably would have been scared as hell right then and there. But no, not only did it hit the under for 9 overtimes, it was a pretty comfortable under also.
Yeah, I think I have a few takes I'm gonna probably talk about with this. First off, this overtime rule, it doesn't determine who the better team is. It doesn't, because we all know Penn State is the better team. They just lost because they suck. And I know that's kind of ironic saying that they're the better team, but they also suck. Illinois shouldn't be in this close of a game with Penn State. Penn State should have blown them out. But you also got to look at the factor Penn State had 60 minutes of regulation football to beat Illinois, and they just couldn't get the ball moving. The next thing I want to talk about with this is 10 straight instances of the overtime. No one can score from 2-3 yards out. This happened, like, this first true watching of the overtime rule happened to the 2 worst teams it could have. If it was 2 Big 12 teams like Texas Tech and Kansas State, if that goes to 9 overtimes, that's entertaining. But we had to watch Illinois and Penn State duke it out in the trenches. No one could score. It was just awful. It was abysmal. I'm trying to think of other adjectives to describe it, and I can't, because it was just that bad. I don't care for the rule because I don't think it determines who the better team is. I just think it determines who can get 3 yards more often, and I don't think that determines who the better team is. But I do also want to go over the fact, does this make James Franklin, does it make him less viable for those sexier jobs like USC and LSU? Because if I'm USC, do I really want a coach that just lost to Illinois? But at the same time, does it make it easier to get him? Because maybe another school doesn't want to get him.
Well, I mean, put it this way. I mean, how do we not know that he's already got these agreements in place behind the back door? And it just makes it easier for him to, let's just be honest, just take it easy. I guess that's the best word to put it. Maybe he's already gotten a deal. Maybe he knows that this deal is already in place. Maybe he knows that no matter what happens, that they're going to have these big schools coming for him. So therefore, he probably just cares about the season just a little bit less. And I think we're going to get a really good view of that come Saturday night with Ohio State. How does he coach?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm done.
I think it's definitely going to be an interesting storyline because I think this year more than any, his name has popped up in really any Power 5, vacancy. The USC one was, they've talked about him going to USC since years before Clay Helton even got fired. I just, with everything that they've got going on in the recruiting trail, I just don't see Franklin dropping right now. I think because 2022, they have a really solid class. I don't see him with everything that they have and everything that, how stacked the Big Ten is, I think if he was to drop, a lot of those recruits would drop too. And I don't think, I don't know. I don't think he's probably agreed to something already. I think if he does, it'd probably be after the season. But, the Illinois game and the coaching in that one might say otherwise. But the Ohio State game and, the Michigan game down the line, or all those games down the line that Penn State has, I think it's going to be really telling of where James Franklin is mentally, if he even cares about this team, if he's ready to go. Because the LSU one is a good opening for him too. I think that would be a better fit than USC for sure.
Yeah, I also just think LSU is the better job. Going to the SEC, in my opinion, is a lot better than going to the Pac. I mean, we know the SEC runs football, and I also want to see if he were to leave Penn State. Do you think that there's maybe a few recruits that maybe follow him to LSU if he gives them offers too?
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
Because I feel like James Franklin's one of those guys where if you commit to Penn State, you're committing to James Franklin more than the actual program. That's just the vibe that I get with Franklin. I feel like Franklin is just such a people person when he goes to visit recruits. And look, I don't know what Central Pennsylvania is like exactly, because truthfully, I don't really care enough to go to Central Pennsylvania. But honestly, going to Baton Rouge in Louisiana, you get all that good food. You get, you're pretty close to jazz music. You've got I know that they're both electric atmospheres. There's just something about LSU that just as a football program, regardless of who the coach is, it just feels that a little bit more attractive than going to Penn State.
Yeah, I would say LSU is probably one of the best jobs that you can get as a head coach. And I think that if he were to be offered the job, which, let's be fair, he probably already has been getting looks at for that job, I think he would probably take it. And whether the Illinois loss is because he just wasn't fully mentally there for Penn State or other reasons, we don't know. All we can do is speculate, and that's really the best we got. So let's go back a little bit. Let's backtrack a little bit. Andrew, you were talking about something that happened with the University of Houston, and I just want to know what happened in that whole scenario, because you told me a little bit before, but I think it's just such an interesting story.
All right, U of H, I'm calling you out right now. You people lie to me, okay? And I'm not just talking about the credits. No, I'm just kidding. We don't need to go that far. But so U of H, the UH Athletics Twitter page, sent a tweet out Friday. I'm going to pull it up right here. In fact, I'm going to get a screenshot and I'm going to send it to our video editor, Adam, so he can have proof that what I'm saying is true. So Friday, UH, the athletics page, tweets out, it says, retweet this tweet if you want an opportunity to win 2 tickets to the homecoming game versus East Carolina. So me, being broke that I am, but still extremely wanting to go to this game, I retweeted it. Okay. I get a message back at 4:29 Central Time. It says here from the UH Athletic, and I got it right here also. Thank you for helping us spread the red today, and for that we would like to send you a pair of tickets to tomorrow's game versus ECU. When you can, please reply back with your first name, last name, and your email so we can send the tickets over to you. I sent them that information. I sent it also with a thank you so much because I am so very grateful. They said, got it. Tickets will be sent to your email shortly. They sent that at 7:16 p.m. Central. So I wasn't really doing anything Friday night, probably just relaxing, didn't really do too much. Patiently refreshing my email for the tickets to arrive. I go to sleep at 11, nothing yet. I go out with some friends Saturday morning. I come back around 10:30. And tickets are still not in my email. So I send them a follow-up at 11:10 a.m. saying, good morning. Were they supposed to arrive in my inbox last night? Just checking because they still aren't there. So I just wanted to follow up. Thank you. No response since then. UH. Come on, man. I just want you to know that after that 5-hour and 20-minute delay, the rain delay that happened Saturday night, I was in the Houston area around that 7:30 time period anyways, because around 2:30 when I didn't get them, when I didn't get the tickets, I essentially said, it's fine. I'll go out and do something later. No big deal. 7:30, I'm still in the Houston area, but I'm deciding to go home. UH is still in the rain delay after 4.5 hours. They announced that the kickoff was going to be 8:20. UH, if you would have sent me the tickets, I would have been at the 8:20 kickoff because I saw that attendance. And I don't even think they announced the attendance because of how few people showed up through after the rain delay. I would have been there if I would have received those tickets. I'm just saying, okay? I would have been there for the overtime. But I still love you. I will still rep the red and white. I will still yell, eat 'em up, go Cougs, go. I am not mad, but I'm just a little disappointed. I've already bought my tickets for SMU this weekend, so I'm willing to forgive for right now. Actually, I'll forgive you, period. We can just move past. But if you want to send me a little gift basket, I'm totally cool with that too.
The phrase all kids dread to hear from their parents, not mad, just disappointed. Gosh. Yeah, Houston, come on. It's East Carolina. Come on, give the man his tickets. Speaking
by the
of
way,
Houston,
I'm going to be out of town come November 19th, so I will be unavailable for the Memphis game. Just want to throw that out there too.
if any Houston reps are listening, just know he's not available that weekend. Speaking of Houston, let's talk about something that we do that not a lot of other people do. We respect the G5. We respect the group of 5 teams that are performing very well, and we want to give them their well due. This AP poll hasn't really done that. The AP poll, now we know the AP poll, it's not that great. It's from a lot of people that care more about brands than teams. But this one was a little bit weird because there were definitely a few G5 teams in there, but there were also some that just like, okay, why are they not here? Like, I mean, me personally, I would put Houston above Coastal. Coastal just had a disappointing loss to App State, even though App State is a good team. And Houston has played very well. And Houston's also getting less votes than NC State. NC State having a good year, but they just had a pretty bad loss to Miami. I want to get your guys' opinions on who's too high and who's too low in this week's AP poll.
I don't think Iowa should still be in the top 10, to be honest with you. I don't understand that at all. Now, granted, they have wins that at the time looked good, but like against Iowa State, against Indiana. Now Iowa State's ranked again, but Indiana really fell off a cliff. Not like a lot of us expected them to be, anywhere near where they were last year. But top 10 over like Ole Miss, Wake Forest is undefeated with some pretty solid wins. I mean, after that Purdue loss, man, I can't put them in the top 10. Transfer portal put them at 17, and I think they're starting to get some love for that because, frankly, I honestly think 17 might be too high. Fresno State, I think they could be ranked. We've had, Nevada and Fresno State kind of ranked in there in our rankings off and on. San Diego State at 21. I think San Diego State's by far the worst undefeated team, but that's not really saying a whole lot. UTSA, I think, should be ranked higher. We've been all over the UTSA train for this entire season, even before the season started. We have them 5 spots higher than the AP poll does. I do agree Coastal is probably, good without being ranked. I didn't think that, of course they were really high because of last year's success and they were running over everybody. And in the App State game, I don't think they're deserving of being ranked anymore. BYU's got some good wins, so I don't know if you can call them group of 5 because they're independent, but we want to, shout out the group of 5. Those teams can ball too. Like at SMU, we have them top 15. They deserve more love and the AP needs to show it. I mean, there was no reason that last week Clemson should have gotten any votes. No reason whatsoever, especially not now, but even before, no reason. And like you said, they prefer brands over quality football teams. And that's going to be true for as long as the AP poll is a thing, but not at the transfer portal.
So one thing I wanted to bring up real quick, and I think I shared it in one of our group chats earlier. Kind of going back to like the only reason why Coastal Carolina is even ranked right now is because the AP beat writer out of the University of Texas, I forgot what his name was. He forgot or just straight up didn't know that Coastal lost to Appalachian State. So therefore, when he submitted his ballot, in fact, I'm gonna look up I'm gonna look it up right now. I'm sure I have it somewhere. When he submitted his ballot, he put okay, here we go. He put his ballot with Coastal Carolina at number 8 after the Appalachian State loss. I'm gonna find this guy. Okay, I'm a little busy right now, but I'm gonna find his Twitter handle. And whenever somebody called him out on Twitter about it, he was just like, "My fault, my bad." No, dude, not your bad. You're freaking stupid. Okay, how do you not realize that your number 8 team in your AP poll lost to Appalachian State? That is the only, because of the points that Coastal got on that ranking. That's the only reason why they're still ranked at number 24. And secondly, I could go on to UH also. Okay, sure, it's easy for me to defend them. I mean, I personally feel like they've been disrespected the whole season ever since the Texas Tech loss. They were a 4-point underdog against Tulane after they won 3 straight in a row, and Tulane only won 1 game up to that point. Freaking beat them by, not Tulane, Tulsa. They were a 4-point underdog to Tulsa. They beat them by 18, I believe. And then they were only favored by 6 against Tulane, and they ended up winning that game by almost 20. I just don't understand, that. I think the fact that it took 2 weeks ago, last week, for UTSA to finally get ranked is ridiculous. I feel like we've had UTSA ranked for like 4 weeks now. I think UTSA, I think they're going to UTEP next weekend, and I think they're going to win that game. I think SMU at 19 is too low for them. To me, they're a top 15 team. I think their offense can score against anybody. And I'm kind of like, I don't know why Louisiana are still getting votes. I don't know why Louisiana is getting more votes than Houston. It's just one of those things that I just don't understand. And the more that I look at the AP poll, I'm personally done with BYU, to be honest with you. I don't know what I'm supposed to look at with BYU. Personally, the person that the university is named after is one of the worst people of all time, but that's a different story. I am not sold on Auburn. I think Oklahoma State, I think they deserve a little bit more of a drop other than 15. I think they could go to like 17 or so. And I just don't know how some of these top 10 teams are legit. I don't know how legit they are. And that was the hardest part about filling out my top 25 for the weekend. Do I firmly believe that Michigan could beat, that they are one of the 10 best teams? I don't think I could buy that idea, to be honest with you. I don't know if I could say that about Michigan State. I don't know if I could say that about Iowa. I feel like Ole Miss could beat a couple of those teams. I mean, the whole AP poll is just a mess right now. I can't even take it seriously anymore.
For clarification, we've had UTSA ranked for each of the last 5 weeks. So put some respect on our name because we respect UTSA.
Meet. All right. I'm going to jump all over the place, so I apologize. First team I want to talk about is Oklahoma. We touched on Oklahoma earlier. They were just in a sweaty game with Kansas. It got so bad that the University of Kansas, and this is how you can tell this would have been the biggest upset pretty much ever for them. They emailed everybody in the state of Kansas saying, "Hey, we need more people here. This might be something special." That's just disgusting on Oklahoma's part. You're letting a team that the entire state of Kansas, just no one cares about that football program. No one does. There was a time lapse that happened in somewhere, some platform. First quarter, second quarter, third quarter. First quarter, that stadium is maybe 10% capacity. It's disgusting. You can tell nobody wants to watch Kansas football. They're just waiting for basketball season. Dylan, did you have to say something, or were you just agreeing with the Kansas?
I was just saying I care about the Kansas football team, but kind of ironic.
Oh, I'm talking about the state of Kansas and like the Kansas students, because no one is going to their games, even though it's college football and it's an electric atmosphere no matter what. So I think Oklahoma should be lower. The only reason they're high is because they haven't lost to anybody yet. But as we've said, they're going to lose sooner rather than later. Next up, I know Dylan talked about Iowa. I'm going to rant about Iowa. Iowa is not a good team. Plain and simple. Their defense is good. it's not like a top three like some people thought it would be. They're so based off of winning the turnover battle that when they go up against a team that has a competent defense and an offense that doesn't give up the ball very easily, they're going to lose. We saw that against Purdue. Petrus threw what, 4 picks, and they played awful. They lost 24-7 or something along those lines. I don't think I was good. I think I was going to lose to Wisconsin this week. And honestly, no bias, I think they could lose to Minnesota. Minnesota is a team that doesn't really give up the ball a ton, and they have a good run defense. I could definitely see them beating Iowa. I think Iowa finishes with 3 losses probably, even if it's not Minnesota. I just think they're going to lose some other game outside of Wisconsin. Jumping down, I agree with Andrew. I think Oklahoma State needs to drop a little bit more after losing to Iowa State. Iowa State is a half decent team. They're getting the ball rolling later in the season, but I don't know. Oklahoma State, we kind of knew they were going to lose at some point. We all had that feeling they weren't going to go 11-0 into Bedlam. Going down, it's like, I don't know, 21 for San Diego State. I understand they're undefeated, but they really haven't played great teams. Air Force is a good team, but they're not great. I want to see them play a dynamic team and see what they're made of, because I don't think they're made of much. And then
Fresno
we've already
State
talked
this
about
weekend.
they're losing that. And I want to talk a little bit more about some of the teams that are just even receiving votes. First off, Virginia needs more votes. I know we're talking about teams that are overrated. Virginia needs more votes. They're a good team with a good quarterback, Brendan Armstrong. And I want to talk about even just the teams that got very few votes. Why is Florida getting votes? 4-3. I understand the loss to Alabama. Most teams are going to lose to Alabama. You're going to lose to Georgia this week. They're about to be 4-4, a 500 club. They shouldn't get a vote. And then they also have losses to Kentucky. Kentucky's a good team, but I would expect Florida to beat Kentucky. And LSU. LSU is a broken program with, they don't even have a official head coach. Ed Orgeron's just standing on the field doing nothing at this point. I don't know why they're getting votes. I don't think they're a good team. I think I just wrote an article and released it. I think Dan Mullen needs to start coaching a lot more. I think he needs to bring in more talent. And I don't know if he knows who his best quarterback in his room is, because he's playing Emory Jones like he's the best quarterback. But Anthony Richardson, when he's played pretty well. And also Minnesota receiving a vote. I'm a Minnesota fan. I don't agree with this. They've beaten teams, Nebraska, Maryland. Maryland sucks. Nebraska sucks. I want to see them beat a competent team or beat more bad teams. I'm not ready to buy in on Minnesota, especially with an offense that can't get more than 150 passing yards consistently. I understand they're a rushing team and that's their offensive scheme, but it's not going to be able to be, it's not viable when you're going up against a team like, say, Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a good defense, and I don't know how Minnesota's defense is going to be able to stay in the game. Like they're a good defense, but knowing those games, they're going to probably end up losing. I'm a Minnesota fan. We're going to not get upset, but we're going to lose to one of these bad teams. I completely expect it.
One team that I kind of want to talk about that got votes, and I think rightfully so that they got a few, and I might get crucified for this, but it's Oregon State. Now, looking at their schedule, they didn't beat a lot of really good teams. At the time, the USC win was kind of like, holy smokes, this team might actually be really good. Now, obviously, USC is kind of garbage, but Oregon State was projected to be like bottom 2, bottom 3 in the Pac-12 coming into this year. I think Jonathan Smith has done a phenomenal job with that team. That offense has looked really good with Chance Nolan. They have one of the best running back duos in the country. They're first place in the Pac-12 North, which I think a lot of people aren't talking about, which is, it's crazy to think about. But, going down the line, they could really play spoilers. They play Arizona State at home in November, and they play at Oregon in Eugene. And I think, this team could be good enough to win out. Honestly, they're 5-2 right now. They play at Colorado, home against Stanford, and then those last 2 games I mentioned. So honestly, I think this is a really underrated team. I don't know if they deserve to be in the top 25 given their resume, but they've done a phenomenal job turning that program around.
Why does Oregon State have the tiebreaker over Oregon right now?
I don't know. I think it's because Oregon
point differential. That's the only thing that I'm seeing here.
Yeah, because both teams have one loss in the North, because Oregon lost to Stanford and Oregon State lost to Wazoo. But I think it's the point differential.
Yeah, that is going to be an interesting team to watch the rest of the season. So we talked about who's too high. Dylan just talked about who he thinks is too low. I want to get Wisconsin Andrews' pick. Who do you think is too low in this AP poll? I know we've talked about G5 teams need more respect, but do you think there's another team that we're kind of undervaluing right now?
Now, when you say we're undervaluing, are we talking about the AP?
The
or are we
AP poll,
talking?
not us, because we're
Okay,
better
good,
than the
good.
AP poll. We all know this.
We are great people. That is the most
Yes.
important thing to talk about. I mean, I kind of already touched on it. I already said SMU. I mean, I as much as I pray for SMU's what's the word?
The downfall.
Yeah, I had a stronger word than downfall. Demise. There we go. As much as I'm praying for SMU's demise this Saturday, I just think they're just a really good team. It's the most fun offense to watch in my honest opinion. They're better than 19. If you mean to tell me that there are 18 teams better in the country, that there are 18 teams in the country that are better than SMU, I don't believe you for a split second. I don't think there are even 14 teams that are better than SMU right now. The job that Sonny Dykes has done with that SMU team this year is spectacular. They deserve all the credit, and it kind of sucks because they could lose to Houston this weekend, and people are going to be confused to how to take it. They're going to take it as, oh, Houston has one of the best defenses in the country. They have a top 10 defense at worst. Then I'm going to be like, okay, now hold on here. It took you this long to acknowledge the fact that Houston had a really good defense. But then let's say, then same thing. Like if Houston is to beat SMU this weekend, are people going to start calling SMU a fraud because they lost to an unranked team? Well, remember SMU, they got to play Cincinnati fairly soon. So now it all comes down to like, how are you going to view this SMU versus Houston matchup, which I'm going to be writing about later this week. I think those two teams, the fact that it's not a ranked matchup is a disgrace. SMU has one of the best offenses in the country. Houston has one of the best defenses in the country. I read earlier today that in 2018, Houston gave up the third highest conversion rate on third downs in the history of the FBS. Now they're the best or among the best in the FBS right now. It's just a huge props to Doug Belk and what he's done this year. Honestly, all G5 Texas teams that are, somewhat getting noticed, I just don't think they're getting noticed enough. I am talking, of course, on UTSA, Houston, SMU, maybe even UTEP. UTEP is currently 6-1, and nobody's really even talking about it. There's a huge, cult following right now to get College Game Day in El Paso next Saturday for UTSA, UTEP. Those Texas programs, those Texas G5 programs, not named Rice or UNT, they deserve more credit. They really do.
Yeah. College Game Day at UTEP, UTSA would just be out. It would be uncharacteristic. It won't happen. It should happen. That's going to be an amazing game to watch. I'd say probably the only team that I think is disrespectfully too low is Pitt. I think Pitt has proved themselves as the best or second best team in the ACC behind maybe Wake Forest, depending on how you think of them. Pitt's team going into this year, they weren't expected to be great. I mean, ACC is always going to be expected for Clemson and Clemson only. They were, I want to say, minus 800 to win the ACC before the season started. And now look at this. They really aren't in contention to win anything. A 6-1 Pitt with Kenny Pickett looking like a Heisman favorite, not even just an off the grid contender. He's a Heisman favorite. I would say right now it's him, Bryce Young, and Matt Corral. That would probably be my top three. They have a defense that's performed better last few weeks. They played well against Clemson, but Clemson's offense is also just disgusting. Like if you were to watch Clemson's offense YouTube highlights, it would be maybe a 2-second clip, and it would just be Dabo Swinney on the sideline yelling at the refs or something, because that's all their offense has been. It's just disgusting. It's putrid. It's every adjective in the book that means bad. But Pitt's defense has looked better. They had the one loss to Western Michigan, who aren't a bad team. I think Pitt needs to be given more respect and not thought of as just, oh, Kenny Pickett's having a great season, this is why they're winning 6 games. No, it's a team effort. They have a great receiver in Jordan Addison. I think Pitt needs more respect. So those are our reactions to the AP poll. And we all know our poll is better. It just got released on Twitter today, or maybe yesterday, whenever this releases, or whenever you're listening. It came out on the 25th. Next thing I wanted to talk about is the games that we were all watching. Obviously, I was at Maryland, Minnesota. Dylan was live covering Oregon, UCLA, and Andrew's already talked about his experiences with watching Wisconsin and Purdue. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to go first. Maryland, Minnesota. I'm going to be releasing the Go for Game Day article later this week. That'll go over pretty much everything, but I just want to talk about the game. Maryland sucks. Maryland started 4-0, and they just suck. They don't do anything good on offense. Their defense is very lackluster. They can't stop the run, or maybe it's just Minnesota is a very potent run attack, which is probably true as well. But just watching Maryland play, it's not fun. Like, I was at that game, and the only thing that was fun about Maryland was watching them just be awful. Minnesota, I'm not going to buy in on Minnesota yet because I don't think that their way of winning is very viable the rest of the way. I think that they're going to be able to beat the teams that they should beat, but I've already talked about this. I don't know how running for 300 yards a game is going to go against Iowa. It's going to go against Wisconsin. Sure, you can do that against Maryland, but I want to see you throw the ball, because if we look back at 2019, Tanner Morgan was one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He was one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country. He had guys like Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman, and Chris Altman-Bell, very talented receiver. There's no true WR2 for this team. And if there was, I think that they would be able to throw the ball more. But as of right now, I want to say their second leading receiver might be Brevin Spanford, who's a good tight end, but I can't think of a second guy who's just stepped up, because right now it's just Chris Altman-Bell, and Chris Altman-Bell.
So I do want to go ahead and just go a little bit into detail in terms of like Wisconsin, since we're kind of like already talking on Big Ten a little bit. Wisconsin right now, I'm a little bit confused with. We finally have a win over a ranked team, which is our first one in like 11 games, I think it was, against a ranked team. But let's be honest, Purdue is not worthy of being ranked. We're just going to go ahead and just be, they're only there just because they beat Iowa. That's it. But Wisconsin's defense is among the best in the country. I'm convinced. I have no issue saying that. I don't think anybody's going to accuse me of being biased if I said that Wisconsin had top 3 defense in the country. And the running backs right now, honestly, the running backs, they need to be looked out for. Shez Malusi, Braylon Allen right now. Everybody's talking about Kenneth Walker. And you know what? Deservedly so. Travion Henderson is a freaking beast at Ohio State. Really is. But if we're going off of long-term over the next couple of years, watch out for Braylon Allen. This dude is 17 years old. He's a true freshman. He's 240 pounds. Think about that. 17 years old. He should still be in high school right now. He was able to graduate a year early from my hometown in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. He should be in high school right now, finishing out his senior year. He's not. He's enrolled early at Wisconsin. 240 pounds, 17 years old. Derrick Henry is 247 pounds. This dude is 17 years old, and he's only 7 pounds lighter than Derrick Henry. And he's just been named, I think he's been named Big Ten Freshman of the Week for the second week in a row. This guy, I've seen a lot of exciting talents come through Wisconsin that I've gotten excited for after only a game. Melvin Gordon being one of them, Russell Wilson being one of them. I just do not think enough people in the Big Ten or in college football right now are talking about Braylon Allen right now. He broke an 81-yard run against Purdue, and nobody was able to get to him until he was essentially pushed out of bounds. He got a 14-yard touchdown run against Purdue, and he was just bullying everyone on the way there. This guy is a beast. He is scary. I am 240 pounds for the wrong reasons, okay? This dude is 240 pounds because he's a freaking linebacker that's playing running back. And even the defensive coordinator, Jim Leonard, is saying that he wants Braylon Allen on the defensive end or like on the defensive side of the ball playing linebacker. But guess what? There's already too many great linebackers on the Wisconsin team. You got Jack Samber, you got freaking Leo Chanel, who for me was the defensive player of the week, with all respect to Kayvon. This dude got 3 sacks, 3.5 sacks, 5.5 tackles for losses. This Wisconsin linebacking core is arguably the best in the country right now, with all due respect to Georgia. But we all know Wisconsin's biggest, worst, let's just be honest, the scoliosis Achilles heel of the entire team. And that is always the quarterback. Wisconsin has arguably the best defense in the Big Ten, probably for me, the best defense in the Big Ten. They got a really good stable of running backs right now. They can run for 300 yards total on the ground any given day. But let's be honest, if you stack the box against them, it comes down to Graham Mertz. And for me, he still lacked a whole lot of awareness against Purdue. He still needs to step it up. Because right now his play is only hindering the defense, is only hindering the offense. And as much as I'd like to believe that we're going to beat Iowa at Camp Randall this weekend, he is just the one weakest link that I look at and I think to myself, is that why we're not going to get it done? That's honestly it. And honestly, the whole thing with Houston right now, I did end up watching it, but I went to sleep in the beginning of the fourth quarter because we were up by 14. So I told myself it's 11:30, 11 o'clock, almost 11:30. I'm tired. We're up by 14. We should win this game with ease. No, I wake up, I saw that we gave up 14 in the fourth quarter and we had to go to overtime. So it's kind of, even though we won, I'm kind of pissed off, but that's all I got to say.
Yeah, I was watching mostly the Oklahoma-Kansas game in the early slate, but I turned my attention obviously to the Oregon-UCLA game. I won't go too terribly into detail on it, but I'm really, really impressed with the way that Oregon bounced back after yet another slow start. They gave up the first 2 touchdowns, had a 3-and-out on their first drive, and then they just wouldn't stop scoring. Travis Dye had 4 straight carries with a touchdown, which was, I believe, an FBS record, maybe even a D1 record. And he was just the offense just looked way better. The passing offense was more crisp until Anthony Brown threw 2 stupid interceptions. And then you have Kayvon, who, was a freak on a leash in his first full game. I saw him dominate Elijah Vera Tucker in that Pac-12 championship game. I think he was even more dominant in this game. And I just think the way that they played and finished that game against UCLA, given the fact that they gave up 2 touchdown drives and they threw the 2 picks, I'm very happy with the result against a really solid UCLA team. I just have this feeling that the way that Oregon's been playing, kind of like Andrew, Minnesota, Andrew, how you feel about the Gophers, I just feel like their way of winning just these tight, close, narrow games that against teams that they should blow out. I just feel like it's going to, bite them at the end. I feel like that Utah game could be a trap game. Utah's played really, really well. I feel like Oregon State is a trap game. How I don't even feel super confident against Colorado next week because of the way that Oregon's played against teams like Stony Brook and Arizona and Cal. I'm just confused on how to feel because like Ohio State, they look like a top 3 team in the country. And then other games, they just look super underwhelming. But I am happy with the result. I just want to see them continue to get better instead of playing down to every opponent.
Yeah, as someone who's unfortunately had to watch Colorado play a game of football this year, I wouldn't be too worried about them. They suck. But you know what? Everyone's able to be worried. Pretty much the only school that shouldn't be worried about anything right now is Georgia. Georgia's just going to roll to the SEC championship. Then we're going to see most likely a rematch of Georgia, Alabama. Not a rematch, but of years past, we've seen that. And yeah, this was an interesting slate. Going into this week, we weren't expecting a good slate of football. It kind of depends on what your definition of good is, because, a lot of people aren't going to say Oklahoma played a good game of football, but it was an entertaining game of football to watch. No one expected Kansas to even keep it close. And we got a good game of football out of that. We got a good game out of Army, Wake Forest. We haven't even talked about that. 126 points between Army and Wake Forest. Who the heck saw that coming? And I think that's going to be there's going to be another interesting storyline with Wake Forest this year. I think that they're an interesting team. Whether you think that they're going to win the ACC, or whether you think they're going to finish with 3 or 4 losses, it's going to be something to watch. Next thing I kind of want to talk about, we were talking about top 10 teams earlier. We've talked about Oklahoma, talking about Oregon. Are there any top 10 teams actually worthy of not being in the top 10? Because we've talked about Iowa. We don't think Iowa's a top 10 team. Are there any other teams that you think just shouldn't be there? Or is it just we haven't seen enough from these teams that we think make them worthy of being in the top 10?
I feel like it's kind of a question of like, at times, who actually belongs in the top 10. Like we've seen so many times where some of these teams that are up there just don't look like top 10 teams. You talk about Ohio State early in the year, they really struggled. Alabama's lost to A&M, Cincinnati this week against Navy, Oklahoma a multitude of times. The only team that in my mind has looked like a top 10 team from start to finish has been Georgia, which you talked about. They're rolling through everybody. I think Michigan and Michigan State have looked really good. Michigan State had a couple wobbly games, but Michigan's played as clean a football as anybody in the country. I think Michigan is honestly underrated, which is kind of crazy for me to say, because I'm one of those people that's always like, Michigan's underrated. I don't like Jim Harbaugh. They're going to choke. Like I'm usually one of those people that's on the Michigan hate train, but I'm all in on Michigan this year. I think this, now I might be going crazy, but this could be the year that they actually beat Ohio State. But the way that Ohio State is playing, I don't see that happening. Their offense is unstoppable. But right now, I think the only team to me that's like that's not a top 10 team that's in the AP ranking is Iowa. That's not a top 10 team. The only reason why is because of their early season wins, like I said, against teams that are not even really that good anymore.
Truthfully, whenever I look at this top 10, I'm kind of just like done with the whole debate of like who's worthy of being a top 10 team and all that. I kind of just look at it now like I think we just got to let things play out, because let's just be honest, there's been way too much inconsistency this year in terms of, you know, how we could be so quick to judge a team, but they turn around just like that. I think Ohio State's the absolute perfect example of that. Ever since their loss to Oregon, it was like, oh my God, this is nowhere near the Ohio State team that we're used to. They fell down to 11 right afterwards. Bang, now we're talking about Ohio State, how they're probably the most consistent team in the country right now, ever since had that halftime against Tulsa. I just look at the top 10 right now, and there are questions that I ask, but it doesn't really reflect the top 10. If I took Texas A&M right now, and look, I know Texas A&M brutal loss against Mississippi State earlier, and then they come on, they beat Alabama the next week, and I forgot to mention the Arkansas. It feels like we already forgot about Arkansas even in the same stratosphere of this world. But if I took Texas A&M is, I love running backs. I love running back duos. They got 2 really good running backs, Isaiah Spiller and Devonta Kane. Zach Calzada's picking it up. It's such a good defense. That they went to Columbia, Missouri. They absolutely shot down that Tigers offense that's played pretty well up to this point. And they absolutely destroyed South Carolina this past weekend. And they held Bryce Young so well. If I took Texas A&M and I took with what they've done over the last couple weeks, and if I put them up against Iowa, Texas A&M wins that game by 14. I take that Texas A&M team and I put them against Oklahoma. I think they skid by Oklahoma. So I think right now, what I'm talking about is whenever we look at these top 10 and all that teams, I think there are teams that Michigan would struggle against. I would like to see Michigan against Notre Dame, because I don't really know how good Notre Dame is, but I think Notre Dame at least has the potential. They have the talent potential to the point where they could pull off some good wins over the likes of a Michigan or Michigan State. What is Michigan State if you lock down Kenneth Walker? I just feel like when it comes to all these top 10 teams, there's no top 10 team that I look at and I say, no, you don't belong there. Because let's be honest, you only play the games that are on your schedule. You take care of the wins. And we can only take what we see. And I think Oklahoma is the one anomaly. It's the one where, like, look, you may have won, but let's be honest, you sure as hell didn't look good doing it. I think we're playing a game of matchups here. I think if you were able to shut down one factor of each of these teams, you could beat them. Iowa, you lock down Tyler Goodson, guess what? They're not going to get on the board. It's that simple. If you can contain Matt Corral, guess what? How How do you not lose to Ole Miss? Each team here, we're nowhere near the end of the season yet, even though we're past the halfway point. Every team is beatable. And honestly, for as good as Stetson Bennett and JT Daniels are, I don't think their offense is exactly immortal either. If you're gonna beat Georgia, you're gonna beat them by as much time of possession as you can.
I completely agree with you. I think that the best competition that Georgia would have would be Ohio State, because not only can they air it out, but they have a talented running back duo with Trevion Henderson and Mayan Williams. They would be able to hold the clock, and their defense isn't that good. But as you talked about, Georgia's offense, they're not like some otherworldly offense. It's a good offense, but let's be real. The reason they're 7-0 is because their defense. Their defense is absolutely elite. And I think that as of right now, yes, Georgia has looked the most stable. They've looked the most consistent, and they are easily the number one team in the country right now. But no one is just better than everybody else. Georgia can lose. Cincinnati can lose. Oklahoma will lose. Michigan can lose. And I actually want to go
Alabama can lose if you can get them out.
Alabama's already lost.
They've already lost, but I feel like now we're gonna get into this mood of like, okay, we've seen this show from Nick Saban in terms of like once he loses a game, bang, he gets the troops rallied up. I don't think this is the same rough and tough Alabama defense that we've known for years. It's obviously not. We've obviously already known that since 2019, whenever they play that freaking highlight reel against LSU. Guess what? Alabama, if they were to run the table, guess what? They're back in the playoff. Okay, unless they lose that SEC title game against Georgia. But I think Alabama, even though they've already got a loss, they can still be stopped. And the way you do it is if you try and get them to the outside. This is what A&M did. They tried to get their air yards on the outside. Calzado was able to make quick decisions on the outside because guess what? That Alabama secondary, they're vulnerable. They struggle. They can struggle in the open spaces when it comes to tackle.
Yeah, Alabama can definitely lose again. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that they could lose again in conference play before the SEC championship. I don't think that's completely an outlandish statement. Before we go on, I want to talk a little bit more about Michigan. Dylan talked about them. I'm going to kind of go against what he said. He did say stuff about Michigan State. Michigan hasn't been beating teams by a lot. They played close against Rutgers. They covered their first big number, I want to say, the season against why am I blanking on who they played this weekend?
Well, they did cover against Wisconsin, and then they did beat Northwestern.
Yeah. They covered
but they played Nebraska very closely, and honestly,
they shouldn't have beat Nebraska. They should not.
And let's be honest, Nebraska was Nebraska. That's why they lost.
I was literally yelling at my TV when Michigan played Nebraska. If Adrian Martinez, if I'm remembering correctly, if instead of like staying closer to the lines, if he takes a cut left, unless there's a corner off the screen, he has daylight. He has open daylight. He has the wheels. If he cuts left, first of all, he doesn't fumble unless he just drops the ball, both literally and metaphorically. Nebraska wins that game. We don't talk about Michigan as a top 10, top 15 team, and we probably don't give as much slack to Scott Frost, which he most definitely deserves because he's awful. Michigan, I'm very interested to see this game. I want to say Michigan State is probably the better team just because they've been able to beat the teams that Michigan has also played by more. But at the same time, it's like if Michigan, who has a very good defensive line, one of the best in the country with guys like Aiden Hutchinson, David Ojaba, if they can stop Kenneth Walker, what does that Michigan State offense do? I mean, they're not a prolific passing offense. Like they have a good quarterback, but it's like, it's not something that scares you. But then you also look at the reciprocal. If Michigan State can stop Corum on Michigan, what is Michigan going to do? Because Cade McNamara is not that good. I understand they're 7-0. He's not the reason they're 7-0. The reason they're 7-0 is because their defense has been able to play well. I'm not completely sold on Michigan being a top 10 team. And honestly, if they don't beat Michigan State, I would drop them pretty far because they've barely beaten teams that Michigan State has been able to beat the brakes off of. But at the same time, it's like Michigan State, they're due. Like, you can look great against Rutgers, you can look great against Maryland. What's going to happen when you play your in-state rival that they call you their little brother? I want to see what you do in against them in East Lansing this week. And yeah, I don't know about Michigan being fully there. And then we've talked a ton about Iowa. I want to talk more about Iowa because I freaking hate them. Iowa's fan base, and I'm going to go on a rant here, so I apologize. Iowa's fan base acts as if they're Alabama when they're UNC. UNC, they're a good program. They're not Alabama, which is what Iowa acts like, but they act as if they're just the best thing since sliced bread. They rushed the field against Penn State, and I kind of understand that. It's one of their biggest wins in their program, but it's also like, I mean, I don't know. Iowa's just a weird team. Their offense isn't good. Their defense, honestly, isn't great. Like, it's very good. I should change that. It's a great defense. It's a little overrated just because of the amount of turnovers that they force, and they've been doing it against bad teams like Maryland. Talia, how many picks did Talia have against Iowa? Like 5 or 6. It was awful. And then when they go up against a team that doesn't turn the ball over a ton, Purdue, they get slapped. Not even like, oh, they barely lost. They were still in it. No, they weren't in it in the third quarter. That game was done. We all knew Purdue was going to win. We knew Iowa was going to lose one of these games at some point. And yet the voters keep Iowa in the top 10. I understand they had beaten teams like Iowa State, who were 7 at the time, I want to say, but then they dropped out of the top 25. They beat Indiana to start the season, who were 17 because of 2020 performances. And Indiana sucks. Indiana is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, and they value that as if it's a top 25 win, when in reality, it's a win that you should get. You're Iowa. You should beat Indiana. Indiana's not a good football team. They had a good 2020, but guess what? They suck now. That's what matters. I don't care what happened last year. I care about what's happening now. And then they play Penn State. Penn State's starter gets injured. I don't care about the fans rushing the field with that part because they don't care that their starter got hurt. They care about that they won the football game. I'm going to take into the fact, why are we valuing a win over Penn State so much when, if you watch that game, before Clifford gets hurt, Penn State murders them. Penn State murders the Hawkeyes by 20. That game's not close. But of course, since he gets hurt, the Penn State backup, I can't remember his name, he sucks. He can't throw an accurate ball. Iowa wins that game. I don't know why we're valuing them as a top 10 team when realistically, I don't know if they're a top 20 team.
So the quarterback's name was Taquan Roberson.
He sucks.
He had a QBR of 28.
I'm surprised it was that high.
But I feel like, how do I not know that you're just trying to play a mind game with me, that you're trying to get me confident for this Wisconsin-Iowa game this weekend? How do we not know that?
I mean, even I don't know that. Maybe I am trying to psych you out. Maybe I am trying to get Iowa on this high horse, Wisconsin with too many conference losses, and Iowa's on top of the world going against Minnesota. We upset them. We beat you. And then suddenly, we do something. But no, I'm not that smart.
Well, let's be honest. Okay. The winner here essentially controls their own destiny throughout the Big Ten West.
Yeah, because
that's true.
If Iowa beats you, you have no shot. Like, that's
exactly.
pretty. And then if you beat Iowa realistically doesn't have a shot because they already have a loss to Purdue. But the wild card in this, and I hate to bring this back to my team, the wild card is Minnesota.
No, it obviously is. Because here's the thing. I'm kind of with you a little bit, but I feel like you're trashing Minnesota a little too much. Maybe you're just being brutally honest, and maybe you're just going based on what you've already seen before in the past. Maybe that's what it is.
Probably.
But like, there were times like when I was filling in my ballot, I did somewhat consider putting Minnesota at that 25 spot. Like, I didn't do it. I probably wasn't even like 20% chance of actually doing it, but I at least considered it. And there was a brief period where Minnesota was, they did get a few votes. They got a vote or a few votes. I don't know which one it was. So at least they're getting recognition. And here's another thing to consider. The Wisconsin-Minnesota game is at TCF. to be fair, you haven't beaten us there in like since 2002.
We don't need to bring that up.
But that's beside the point. Now, where do you guys now? Where's the Iowa game between Iowa and Minnesota?
It's in Iowa.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
That's a tough one.
So right now, the Big Ten West is just a giant love triangle mess right now. It's just what it is, And it all starts off with this Saturday. We're gonna see because let's just be honest. You're dissing Minnesota right now with the way that you're talking about them. As much as I love our defense, as much as I love the running backs, I know that we're essentially only going to go as far as the quarterback can go, and you're kind of like already showing your sign of, okay, we're not really too high on what I was going to do. So now it's kind of like, what are we? Is whoever emerges of the three teams, are they just going to be the biggest fraud of all time against Ohio State? Is that where we're at this point? And if I don't know how it all ranks. Let's say Ohio State beats the hell out of one of the three teams, and that team's the losing team's going to go to the Rose Bowl, and are they going to get smacked by Oregon or freaking whoever comes out of the South? We don't even know how it's going to go from here.
Yeah, I will say there is nothing more that I want in this world than Minnesota, Wisconsin to decide the West. Because I'm going to be at that game. I'm going to be in the front row of the student section. It's going to be loud. It's going to be hectic. It's going to be freaking cold. Probably going to just freeze to death before the final whistle blows. And I want Minnesota. And I'm probably really brutal on them because I know what I've seen in the past, and it's disappointment. But I will say, is there a chance we can beat Iowa? In my eyes, yes. Is there a chance we can beat Wisconsin? In my eyes, yes. Iowa less so, because I think that it's going to be tough to run all game on them. And if the scheme is going through the offensive line and the running backs of Bryce Williams, Bucko Irving, and Kai Thomas, where does Tanner Morgan fit in? Because that's how we would realistically beat a team of that caliber. Tanner Morgan has to play well, and he's played well in a decent amount of games this year. I just want to see him do it consistently, because it seems like there are some games, this week included, this last week, we just didn't game plan him. We didn't game plan him. Like, I understand we're rushing 7 yards to carry against Maryland. Why would you stop? I understand that, but at some point you also gotta throw in the quarterback, because you can't run all game. We're not Army. So that was my little rant about Iowa, and we ended up talking about just the entire Big Ten West. Next up, we're going to talk about some more Big Ten teams. We've already talked about Michigan and Michigan State. We'll talk about them a little bit more. We're going to do a little bit of buying and selling. We're going to talk about teams that we think are either a team that we would buy stock in, or we would just completely sell, that we don't believe in. First team, guess what? It's Michigan State. We've already talked a lot about them. Andrew, what do you think is the consensus? Not even the consensus. What do you believe about Michigan State, and would you buy or sell stock in them?
So I'm going to sell on Michigan State, but it's not because I don't think they're talented. It's just, let's just go ahead, just be honest. Every Big Ten East team right now is cursed, okay? No matter how good you are, you could go 11-1, you go 10-2, but let's just be honest. If you don't get past Ohio State, you really haven't proven anything. Well, okay, that's a little harsh to say. But when you're in the Big Ten East, or even just in the Big Ten in general, you really just want to get on top. That's the most important thing. And unfortunately, you're always going to be second fiddle to Ohio State, even if you have the season of the last 10 years. You know what I mean? So whenever I just look at Michigan, they do get Michigan in East Lansing this weekend. We'll obviously talk a bit more on that whenever we bring up the other team. But then they still have to go to Ohio State, and they still have to go against Penn State. I think they could go around 10-2, 11-1, and that's a great year for them. But let's just be honest, they're just going to go with the Outback Bowl. And that's okay, because hopefully they get a tough ACC team so I can get a free bloomin' onion on the next day. But look, Kenneth Walker, fantastic running back, AP All-American. He's a beast. Best rusher one of the best rushers in the country. Michigan State are just in a really tough spot right now, where they're just less talented than Ohio State. But Mel Tucker is doing a fantastic job. I am selling on Michigan State, but it's not because I don't like them. It's just because of that other guy, just in Ohio.
So I'm not as I'm not as well educated on the Big Ten as you guys are, as you could tell by that absence from the rants there. But I'm also going to sell in Michigan State. I think their schedule is a little bit kind of against them. I'm picking Michigan to beat Michigan State in East Lansing. I think at Purdue is not necessarily a gimme. I think at Ohio State and at home against Penn State, that's tough for them. I like Michigan's. I like their chances a little bit better. They get Ohio State at home. They do play at Penn State and at Maryland, home against Indiana. I think Michigan probably finishes with a better record than Michigan State does. So I'm going to sell on Michigan State, and to transition to your next one, I'd buy on Michigan, like I already pretty much said.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to group Michigan State and Michigan together because I'm selling on both of them. It's not about who do I think is the better team, because I think they're both good teams. But let's be real. Neither of them are Ohio State. Neither of them are going to beat Ohio State. Ohio State's going to make the Big Ten championship. Like we all predicted before the season, even when they weren't looking great, we still thought, okay, Ohio State, they'll pull it back. It's just getting to the fact of this game is going to decide who is Ohio State's more attention going to go to. Because let's be frank, Ohio State, they're always going to pay attention to Michigan, or as they would say, Ishigan, because they don't like the letter M. And then Michigan State, you got to pay attention to them just because they're a good team with a great player in Kenneth Walker. It's just the fact that Ohio State's more talented. They're better coached, even though Mel Tucker has done a great job. Even Jim Harbaugh, he's done a good job this year, even though some people thought, he may be on the hot seat if Michigan doesn't perform. I just can't buy either of these teams going with the notion they're not going to go to the Big Ten championship. And why would I put stock in a team that I know is going to lose at some point to a much more talented squad?
It's essentially the same thing what I just said about Michigan State. I mean, you're not selling them because you don't think they're not that good. You're selling them because, well, let's just be honest, because of the opponents that are down ahead. And I'm going to say the same thing on Michigan. Look, Michigan, they got a great running back duo. They got a really good defense that's done really well so far to the season. But this is what I will say. One thing that I think we need to consider enough in terms of long-term bowl aspirations for these two teams, we'll see what happens with Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa in the Big Ten West. Because let's be honest, assuming Ohio State runs the table, loser of that Big Ten title game is going to go to the Rose Bowl. But personally, I think Penn State's done. I don't think they're going to go to New Year's Six Bowl. But I think the winner of this Michigan State-Michigan game, I think they are going to go to a New Year's Six Bowl. So therefore, we're gonna have three Big Ten teams. So Big Ten West team, Rose Bowl, and we'll have Michigan or Michigan State playing on another at large. Probably Com Bowl is a semifinal. Well, we'll see how it all works out. But I do think one of these two teams, even though we might be selling on them, they have a really good chance to go to a New Year's Six Bowl. And I think depending on the matchup that they get, I'll probably go for them. I'll probably go for them. I'm not gonna say my official pick yet between these two teams, because I'm selling both. But winner of this game, yeah, they're going to a New Year's Six Bowl, and they're both going to surpass all the expectations that were placed against them, which is fantastic. But before the season started, I don't think we expected Michigan State to make the bowl seat to make it to the bowl game. They got a chance to go to New Year's Six. Some people were really down on Harbaugh. Some people thought that he was going to get fired. Guess what? He can go to a New Year's Six Bowl. So even if these two teams, even if we're selling on them, they still are going to have a fantastic season. And that's honestly about as nice as we can put it.
Yeah, I mean, we knew going into the season this was Ohio State or bust for the Big Ten, and we didn't really have super high expectations for either of the Michigan teams, and they've outperformed them already. I mean, we didn't think Michigan or Michigan State would be top 10 teams. At least I didn't. And they're top 10 teams. They're about to have a top 10 clash in East Lansing. It's going to be a heck of a game to watch. Probably one of the biggest games in the last month or so of the season, because it's really going to decide, like you said, which of these teams is the for real team in Michigan, who's going to give Ohio State the biggest challenge. And we all know Penn State's not going to win much. And in fact, I don't know if they win any of those games against the Michigan teams or Ohio State. They could easily finish with 5 losses. And I don't think that's outlandish to say, which is it's very disappointing seeing how they started the season, how impressive they looked. They were number 4 in the country at one point, and now it's like we're talking about a team that's barely bowling. It's pretty disappointing. We've already talked a lot about the Big Ten. Let's go back to the ACC, a team I've already spoken very highly of. Let's talk about Pittsburgh. I'm gonna just get my little piece out. I've already talked about them a decent amount. Kenny Pickett, Heisman candidate. They've got a very electric offense to watch. It's one of the most fun, in my opinion, to watch in college football. And their defense has improved as of late. I think that they run the table in the ACC. I think they win the ACC. I like them more than Wake Forest. I think Wake Forest at some point is going to slip up, lose 2 or 3 games. They have a tough stretch ending the season. And I think Pitt is for real. They're going to make a New Year's 6. I'm really, really high on this Pitt team.
Yeah, I think Pitt has a better schedule. I don't think that's really that. I don't think you can argue that. Wake Forest plays at North Carolina, at Clemson, at Boston College, home against NC State. That's a pretty tough stretch. It's also one of those things that it's really weird. The ACC is kind of one of those conferences that beats up on each other. I expect probably both these teams to lose at least one more game. So I think Pitt, their one would probably be that North Carolina game, because I think North Carolina is kind of maybe on the come up, at least compared to where they were. The Virginia one's not a gimme either. Syracuse, Duke, those could get weird, honestly. Duke is a weird team. I like Mateo Durant and the offense that they have, but I think Pitt will handle them. But yeah, I agree. I think Pitt is a team to buy on right now. I think they're a team that could win the ACC. It's going to be really fun to watch how the ACC unfolds now that it's not Clemson, now that we know that someone else is finally going to be at that ACC title game and come out and be a New Year's 6 team out of the ACC. It's really fun that Clemson's not in there anymore.
You know what? Screw it. I'll buy Pitt. I think Pitt has really rebounded well since they lost to Western Michigan. Let's be honest, Western Michigan is a very good team, among the best in the MAC. So, you know what? I'll buy Pitt. I do think they do have a better stretch than Wake Forest does, because I think Wake Forest, they got to go to Clemson also. I think Clemson is still a tough defense, even though the offense is, let's just go ahead and just be honest, it's absolutely terrible. It's unbearable to watch. They do have to play NC State. I think that is a really tough game for Wake Forest also. I also like Pittsburgh's schedule a little bit more on the aspect that their toughest games are at home. Their game against North Carolina, home. The game against Virginia, home. And as much as I really like Brennan Armstrong, and Virginia does deserve more love, Pitt is the better team. I think they're going to win. I think the whole topic for an ACC team making the playoff, I think that conversation is dead, to be honest. Even if Wake Forest goes all the way, even if they win all their games, even if they win the ACC title game, I don't think they're going to be given even a look into the playoff, because just of how terrible the ACC has been this year outside of those 2 teams that we're talking about. Yeah, screw it. Buy Pitt, make a Fiesta Bowl. That's really all I got to say.
Yeah, I would say a 12-1 Pitt, and this is just my personal opinion. I think a 12-1 Pitt would get more looks than a 13-0 Wake Forest, just because brands, Wake Forest is not a football brand, and I think the fact that Pitt has a Heisman favorite on their team would be a little bit more appealing than Wake Forest, who has a good quarterback, Sam Hartman. He's played amazingly this year. He needs more love as well. But yeah, I would say Pitt. I'm buying all shares on Pitt. If you're selling any, DM me on Twitter. I will give you a good price on them, because that stock is going to skyrocket. And speaking of stocks, that's a great transition right there. We talked about NFL draft stock. We saw a lot of great players play this weekend, including the guy that I've really liked, Kenny Pickett. How many players, or let's change that. Who's got the best draft stock improvement from this last weekend? Let's start with Dylan on this one.
Well, actually, it's one of the guys you just talked about, and Sam Hartman. I think the way that he's continued to get better each and every game is really, really impressive. He actually has more passing yards in every game from the week before. He had 458, 6 total touchdowns, 5 passing. He's played really, really well, has a ton of talent. A.T. Perry, Ja'Cory Roberson. It's a really talented, dynamic offense. I think he's, had a really solid year, 19 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. His quarterback rating ranks 5th in the country. I think he's been really underrated. Like you said, I think he deserves more love. I talked pretty heavily about Kayvon Thibodeau in the preview for last week. And honestly, I think if you, for some reason, think that Kayvon is not the number one prospect in this draft, I think you are high on something that is illegal in this country, because I absolutely looked like it on every snap. I mean, he was dominant. And UCLA has a fairly good offensive line. Sean Ryan is a really good player. Alec Anderson, while it may not have looked like it for 60 minutes or for however long Oregon's defense was on the field, he's a really good right tackle too. But Kayvon is just a man, and he's a manimal, and he just looks like he's already in the NFL playing against JUCO guys. He's on another level. So I feel like Kayvon, if his draft stock couldn't get higher, I think it did in this game, because of just how dominant he was all over. The one thing I will say, Tim DeRuyter, stop making him drop back. I know you list him as an outside linebacker, but stop dropping him back in coverage. That's not his game. Stop. That's only going to make it worse for people. They're going to be like, yeah, if he gets into some sort of defense where they want him to drop back, he's going to struggle. Maybe just stop dropping him back, because I don't think any team in the NFL would use him in that way, and they shouldn't. But he's one of the most dominant edge rushers I've ever seen at the college level. I kind of got flamed on Twitter for putting that, but I think he's up there for sure. He's one of the most dominant at this level that I've seen.
So I'm going to go ahead and just be honest. I am like one of the most dumbest people of all time when it comes to like NFL draft stock. So I'm just going to say a player that I just think is really good, and you guys can just tell me what his projection is. And if he was already a first rounder, then shame on me. And if he was like a fourth rounder, then you know what? Maybe I might look like a genius here. So I'm going to go ahead and just say Drake London, wide receiver for USC. He was my breakout wide receiver last year. It's kind of hard to say that because USC obviously did have a very COVID-stricken season. That was the common thing with the Pac-12. So he was already somewhat of a household name for, wide receivers. But guys, he leads all FBS wide receivers, if I'm not mistaken, at 1,003 yards after only 7 games. That is honestly, hang on. Jarrett Stearns is ahead of him, my bad, by about 74 yards. Among Power 5 wide receivers. There we go. Let's clarify on that. He's done fantastic this year. He's already got 5 touchdowns on the year. His receiving mark is fantastic. And the fact that he's able to do this with, let's just be honest, a USC team that has faced a lot of, let's just say, bad looks, with regards to Clay Helton, the fact that there was, some controversy from Clovis to Dart. And he's had to play around with the running with the quarterbacks a little bit. So I think Drake London, I think he does deserve a little bit more respect. I don't think he really gets talked about as much as he deserves. And I think it's just because he's got a huge, let's just be honest, USC is the big monkey on the back. That's kind of like everybody looks at a negative light. So it's kind of hard to look at him with anything positive. So, you tell me, where was Drake London projected? And I don't know, has he only gotten better? Because I literally don't know.
I would say for Drake London, over the last few weeks, I've definitely seen him get first round looks. I think he's going to end up probably in the first round, especially if he has a good pre-draft process. The Notre Dame game definitely helped. So don't worry, that was actually a really good player. In fact, I actually had him written down. Drake London, yeah, definitely a great player. I think he's going to get more first round looks as we go on throughout the season. And actually a guy Dylan touched on very briefly, Jaquarii Roberson. He had such a good game against Army. He's got 39, 672, and 5 on the season. And I really like him a little bit later. Like, he's not going to be a first rounder. A little bit later in the draft, if a team's looking for a good, like, WR3, I think he's going to be able to give some good progress to a good offense. He's going to be a great player. But the guy I want to talk a little bit more about is my guy, Ko Kieft, the blocking tight end from Minnesota. I had to throw in a gopher. Ko Kieft is just the definition of a blocker. He's almost like a Mercedes Lewis to me. He's not as tall as Mercedes Lewis, but he's just got the aggressiveness on the blocking. One of the big things you'll see with the Minnesota offense is if they're running any sort of just a power O, Ko Kieft is going to line up on one side of the line, and he's going to motion over, and he's going to hook the edge. He just does it with such aggression. He murders outside linebackers and safeties. he's just so good at what he does. And another thing about his game that is widely underrated, he's got soft hands. Like, no one's going to draft him for being a receiving tight end, but if he goes out on a route, he's not a liability. He's not someone who like, oh gosh, we got to send Co out. This is not going to end well. He's going to be someone who you can't just not block him, or you can't not guard him. You got to pay attention to him because he's going to be able to come down with the ball. You know, he's not like a Kyle Pitts who you just throw it up to and he catches, but he knows his role. He plays it amazingly. I don't expect him to be a day 1 or 2 guy. He's definitely a day 3 guy if he gets drafted. But if there's a team that runs the ball a decent amount, I'm looking at you, Baltimore, and you want a blocking tight end, Minnesota has a great one with O'Keefe. And, you know, wouldn't be the first time they drafted a Minnesota skill position. So that is my guy. I also touched on Jaquarii Roberson. I was obviously going to talk about Kenny Pickett because he's gone from who the heck knows where he was projected before the season. And now he's looking at first round, possibly not even possibly. It's looking projected right now, first round. And that is about it for the podcast today. Unless either of you guys have something you want to touch on, I think we are good to wrap this one up.
Yeah, just want to give you a shout out for doing a great job on your first time hosting the pod. Really good stuff.
Thank you very much. And
pretty passionate episode. I think we kind of said a lot. I mean, I called out you called out Iowa. I think we might have some hate mail within the next couple of days.
And you know what? That's great, because I want all the hate mail from Iowa, because that just gives me more opportunities to talk bad about both the program and the fans, because I hate the fans too.
And the state.
Oh, we hate the state of Iowa. We hate everything about Iowa. Hey, you know what? We hate each other. That's one thing we can agree on. Minnesota, Wisconsin. It's like the good old Twitter thing. You have the handshake. Minnesota fans, Wisconsin fans hating everything about Iowa. We hate Iowa. That's something we can agree on. And yeah, just want to thank everybody for watching, listening. You know, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, make sure to follow the podcast. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe, share it, do all that stuff. And appreciate you for listening or watching, and have a great day.